Welcome to another episode of the Dawg on It Trucking Podcast. Who is in the doghouse this week? Gary Dhaliwal from Hutch Systems. And he is excited to share that Hutch Systems is the very first ELD provider certified in Canada. And we get into how the certification process works. What are the pitfalls that you might watch out for when you do your research to select an ELD certified provider? All right, so let's get on with the show. Gary, welcome to the Dawg on It Trucking Podcast. And the first thing I want to say is congrats. Hutch, I just got off the website at Transport Canada, and Hutch is still the only certified provider of the ELD system in Canada. So I just want to say congrats, and with that, Gary, welcome. Tell us, how did Hutch become the first certified provider of ELDs in Canada?
So let's first of all, I would introduce myself to begin, and I would like to. My name is Gary Dhaliwal. I'm the founder of and CTO of Hutch Systems, and I would like to thank you, PMCT, CTA, and all of the other government bodies and CCMTA, Transport Canada, to finally give us the opportunity to design an ELD to be certified in Canada. So I would like to thank you them first.
Yay! Here, I'll give you another round of applause.
So how did we become the first certified? I'm actually proud of the team work we have done. And this was a team effort, not just a solo effort. And we got a very dedicated team of engineers, of support staff, of management. And we worked extremely hard to achieve this ELD certification. And whereas my team, the question was, how come we became the first one? My team and I love reading the technical documents. That's our go-to material to read. And personally, I get bored with the novels. But if you give me a textbook to read and or any technical material to read, yeah, we love that, because that's our passion, and our passion is trucking as well. And years of experience in the industry. I have been a driver myself, and a lot of the other team players that are in the Hutch team, they are involved in the trucking sector themselves. At one point of time, they have been. And I have been a driver, as I just mentioned, a dispatcher, and a safety consultant.
Yay!
And an engineer.
Well, we got to go back to the safety consultant part. Yay for the safety consultants in the world. But you are also an engineer?
Yes. And having all of this experience, that actually helped us tremendously, because this ELD space and safety consulting and dispatcher, looking from the driver's point of view, and we took all of that in and we implemented the ELD. And we spent months reading when FMCSA had their regulations out. We spent months reading it, taking notes, planning, and finally we released our first self-certified ELD to be registered with FMCSA, and we were the fourth one to do that. And we were the first Canadian company to do that as well. So, and I'm actually very keen to know who were the first three, because I cannot find them, and I would love to hear from them their story. How did they beat us to be the first three? And when it came down to Canadian mandate, we did everything right to FMCSA technical standards, because as I mentioned, we love reading technical standards. And when Canadians introduced the regulations, and we just jumped on, we got their test procedures, read the technical standard. And when we realized all of what was required, found that there were only very minor tweaks that we needed to make in our software to comply with the technical standards of Canada. So we just we as a team, we planned, we read the material. As I mentioned, we love reading the technical standard, and then we as a team worked extremely hard to accomplish this certification. And of course, as you know, this certification is a very rigorous process. And I'm actually very thankful to FP Innovation for testing our ELD to the test procedures released by CCMTA. And those are 450 test procedures. And it does take time to go through them all to make sure that the ELD that they are certifying meets all of the technical standards. And we feel proud of the work that they have done, and and I personally feel proud of the teamwork that we as a Hutch Warriors, we call ourselves Hutch Warriors, have done, and to accomplish this ELD certification.
Well,
and we became the first one.
It's awesome. First of all, that a Canadian company is the first one, because you've got some pretty big players out there that are battling against you or that you are competing with. So tell us, where are you located?
We are actually located in Abbotsford, British Columbia, and we are actually the farmer boys, you can call us, because we are in the countryside, and it's in Abbotsford, British Columbia, and it's a beautiful British Columbia, I should say, and also beautiful Canada, and that's where we are on the Pacific Coast.
Yeah, and as I say, congrats. Now, before we started, I wanted to ask you a question about why Canada decided to do the certifications as opposed to the self-certified way that the U.S. did. What are some of the problems with self-certification, the way the U.S. did it, that you might look at?
See, my opinion on self-certification, I believe there's nothing wrong with the self-certification, though, but there has to be some oversight. And it's like when you play a professional sport and versus playing at lunchtime, you know the difference. There's a referee who's actually watching the game, and he knows the set of rules and making sure that all the players are playing according to the set of rules. And if there's any fouls, and he calls on you. And so self-certification, there's nothing wrong with it as long as there is some oversight. And when it comes down to oversighting the big industry the U.S. is, it actually becomes a complicated task. And the enforcement bodies and so forth, of course, it becomes extremely challenging. And again, as CTA, PMCT, and all of the other government agencies, when they looked at it, what was going on in the U.S., I guess they must have decided that, no, we want to take it a different approach, and let's actually, because the motor carriers are the ones who are going to pay the consequences of choosing a non-compliant ELD. And motor carriers already have a lot on their plate. And they don't want to, technical standards, those are not everybody's cup of tea. And where the Canadians have chosen that, no, we want to have a third party certify it. And I believe, my personal opinion is that was the right approach, and this level the playing field for every ELD provider. So they have to play by the same set of rules as Hutch System did, and all of the other ELD providers will be required to play by the same set of rules.
Yeah, now, I think you were being very politically correct in your statement about the self-certification. So I will say it in my words, because I'm not a competitor. It was a messed up system down there because there are many people who are cheating on their ELDs, don't comply with the rules.
Oh.
And I'll tell you, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but it only really becomes important when you get into a crash. And if you're using one of the systems that can be altered by the drivers, man, you're messed up. So I'm very happy that Canada chose the certification route. And if for no other reason, it'll make the decision as to which ELD provider I go with much easier, because instead of 500 and some ELD providers that they have in the States, we're going to have a much smaller number. And the first one on that list right now is Hutch. And the only one on that list right now is Hutch, which is pretty impressive. So Gary,
let me actually touch base with you here. What one of the concerns that during the testing got raised by my team and the other with the CCMTA. Okay. CCMTA, they requested Hutch Systems to, of course, part of the technical standard and test procedures, that we must allow manual entry of driving event. They actually call them events. And anything that's manually added in the ELD, that could be changed to off-duty or any other event because it's a manual entry. And when I got to know that it was required, and I inquired with the CCMTA, they said, yes, it is inquired. I said, well, then it would be very easy for the driver to change from driving to off-duty because it's a manually added event. And they said, yes, it is true. I said, well, then this is the purpose of the certification to begin with, because it must not be, driving time must not be shortened. And they replied back saying, well, there are intermediate log and engine up and engine down events and so forth, and it would be up to the enforcement officer to determine that. I said, well, officers, they already have too much to worry for, and it's actually deceiving the purpose. And then I read the automatic driving time, and I said, well, it actually mentions that the ELD must record an automatic driving when it reaches 8 kilometers an hour. They said, yes, that is true. So I said, well, then, is it required by the ELD, if the driver has a manually added driving event, is it required by the ELD to change it to another event of driving with an automatic status? They say, yes, that is required. I said, well, then that actually has some weight on it, because now that time cannot be shortened. They said, yes, that time cannot be shortened. I said, well, then it will deceive the entire purpose of the driver changing it to manually changing it to driving prior to moving the vehicle. I said, well, I am satisfied with that, and that is the right direction. And so there were a few challenges there where we had to inquire with the CCMTA to clarify the items those are listed in the test procedures. And I am very proud of the work that they have done.
I'm sure there was a lot of hurdles to get over. Now, what are some of the pitfalls that you think people should be watching out for from ELD customers as a fleet? If I'm a fleet, what are some of the pitfalls when choosing an ELD that I should be watching for?
So there are, as I mentioned, that I've been a dispatcher and I owned my trucking company. So I would wear the hat of me being a trucking company rather than being a salesperson, because I am a technical person. I'm not here to sell. I personally can't sell. And because I like to tell the truth. And I think at one point of time, the truth will prevail. And so through this channel, I would like to educate the motor carrier. So let me wear the hat, a virtual hat of a motor carrier.
Right.
So there are a couple of concerns that I think the motor carrier should pay attention to. Number of ELDs are implemented as a hardwire solution, and number are implemented as a handheld solution. So first they need to determine, is the ELD that I'm purchasing or inquiring about, is it a hardwire or is it a handheld? Okay. And when once you have determined that from the ELD vendor, then you should ask yourself, how the ELD, is the ELD implemented in the app running on a mobile device, or is it implemented in a black box that's tied to the ECM of the vehicle? If it is implemented on a handheld device and it's implemented in the ELD, now you need to ask yourself, well, the ELD must be communicating with the ECM when the engine is running. And is it easy for my driver to close the app or turn off the mobile device, and that will start logging power compliance and engine synchronization malfunctions? If that is the case, well, then the drivers already have too much worry out on the road, and you can just imagine that the driver is required to keep his phone running or the tablet running, and he's jumping in the sleeper berth to sleep for 10 hours, and by the time he gets up, and the app may have closed, because Android system and iPhone, they're very picky on saving the battery life, and they may close the app, and well, by the time the driver gets up, and he already may have a malfunction, and now he has to report it to the motor carrier. Motor carrier has to document, and after the documentation, what action the motor carrier took. So those are the ones that I would be looking for. And another one that I would look for is, because as per the technical standard, the driver and the motor carrier or any other person should not interfere with the location services or the times of the ELD. So you can just imagine, if you go to the tablet setting, you can change the time and turn off the location services on the tablet. If that is the case, well then, of course, the ELD must be logging a malfunction, but you can just imagine what sort of nightmare the motor carrier may have on their plate. And the smaller carriers may not have the luxury of implementing safety policies and enforcing them. I do understand the larger carriers do that, but the smaller carriers may not have that. So that is another area of concern I would look at when I am choosing as a motor carrier. Another thing that I would stress on is the unidentified driving.
Which is,
if you read the,
I know that's huge. Yeah, it's a huge problem.
See, if you read the technical standard, right in there, they actually, in the technical standard, they mention that the motor carrier should assign ELD exempt account, and there are only two differences between exempt account and a normal ELD driver account. And the motor carrier should not have any unidentified driving unless somebody who was not employed by the motor carrier drove that vehicle. Could be the dealership where they went to get the vehicle repaired, or somebody else who was a test driving that vehicle or so forth. Then that is the only time the ELD should log unidentified driving, and of course they can rectify that. But if your vehicle is driving down the road and the Bluetooth connection or the Wi-Fi direct connection, which is a local Wi-Fi hotspot type of connection, or the cellular network where it's communicating with the ECM drops out and the ELD starts logging unidentified driving, well, you can just imagine over a 24-hour period how much unidentified driving that you have to worry for. And those are that is another concern. And I should stress on this too, that when I talk to the drivers myself, if there is any malfunctions or data diagnostic event in the ELD, they don't want to drive that vehicle. This is actually very true, because they are scared that somebody's going to pull them over and the enforcement body will give them a hard time. And the ELD is required to log a data diagnostic event, and that data diagnostic event must be clearly visible on the ELD display to the driver and to the enforcement body, and also in the output files. And if there is any unidentified driving of 30 minutes or longer in a 24-hour period, it's going to log that data diagnostic event, and that's going to stay there for the next 14 days.
Yeah,
so with the way that we as a Hutch implemented, and we made sure that there's no unidentified driving unless the motor carrier has somebody who's not who has a driver is not employed by the motor carrier, and they're operating the vehicle. Could be the dealer, mechanic, or so forth. Those are the only times we log the unidentified driving. but every other time it's logged against the correct driver that's logged into the ELD. So there's no much unidentified driving with the Hutch system, and that's another key area I think the motor carrier should pay attention to.
Well, as a consultant, I go in and I look at a lot of ELD systems and I see unidentified driving. There's just a huge amount to manage. And one of the things that I didn't know that you mentioned was if you're using a portable device that's hooked up, you said by Bluetooth or a local Wi-Fi, it can be interfered with, I guess, and dropped. And every time it drops, it creates an event. Is that right?
Yes, that is very correct. It may log unidentified driving event, and plus it will log a data diagnostic event, either the engine synchronization or a power compliance. And if that aggregates over the 24-hour period of more than 30 minutes, then it's going to convert into a malfunction. And as a malfunction, you as a driver need to report that to the motor carrier. And what good of an ELD would be, out of the 30 days, let's say, as an example, 20 days of the ELD is logging malfunctions. Well, then that ELD is no good, and the motor carrier should look at any ELD that make their driver's life a lot easier, because drivers already have a lot to worry out on the road, and this ELD should not cause a driver to have have another area of that they need to stress for. So ELD should be to help them, not to cumbersome their driving, and that's what we believe in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Driver's life is much too difficult as it is without complicating it even more. So, switching topics a little bit, what do you think some of the trouble spots of self-certification are, or what areas did Hutch have trouble with, or what areas do you think some of the other ELD providers might have trouble complying with the Transport Canada certification?
See, as I mentioned that we certified our ELD with FMCSA, so we had a good experience with this over the last 3-4 years, and taken all the kinks out. And but whereas Hutch Systems, we control both the hardware and the software. So they're actually a best married system. And some of the other ELD vendors may not have that luxury. So they may be buying ECM module that's off the shelf from some different vendor, and that vendor may have a different interest to support their multiple customers. And whereas Hutch, we control both the hardware and the software. So we are not that big of a company, but when it comes down to designing the ELD product, and we are very good at it, and with a lot of experience.
And let me ask you this, how many products does Hutch sell?
You mean in regard to the ELD space, or
yes,
in general? Because we are not just an ELD. We're not just an ELD company. We are actually a fleet management company. And we have a lot of experiences in the ELD, GPS tracking, fuel taxes, tire pressure monitoring systems, and a lot of other systems that Hutch Systems designs and takes it to the market. And so we actually have a significant amount of customer base, and those customers are very helpful, providing feedback. And when they provide feedback, we don't just sit on it and we act. And I gather my team, and we get to work, and we listen to our customers.
We're nearing the end of our time, so I've got to ask you this. You said you're not a salesman, but let's get into it. What makes Hutch, their ELD system, different than your competitors?
Well, I would say that our ELD, if you look at just the ELD part of it, FP Innovation, they considered our ELD to be hardwire solution. And even though our ELD has the option to bring in, allow the customer to bring in their own mobile device or mobile phone, a tablet or a phone, and but our ELD is implemented in the telematic device, which is not a dumb box. We call it black boxes, but they're not generally a black box. But the color is black, but they're very intelligent boxes. And that's where we implemented the ELD. And all the other pitfalls which I just mentioned, the driver going to sleep and the ELD logging and malfunctions and so forth, we addressed all of those areas of concern with our ELD. And we make sure that there are no malfunctions and no unidentified driving that is logged in our ELD, except the only time our ELD will log a malfunction if the driver is physically tampering with the ELD, meaning he's taking the ELD off of the ECM, or there is a hardware failure in the ELD, and that's the only time Hutch ELDs will log a malfunctions. But other time it's a smooth sailing, and we want our customer to have a very good experience.
So one of the things I would ask people who are looking to purchase an ELD or be asking their suppliers is what types of malfunctions do they have? Because what you're saying is your system has far fewer malfunctions because it's hardwired and it's a black box system as opposed to using a portable device. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I mean, because no system is perfect, and no system is going to go 100% of the time without a malfunction. After all, it's a computer.
That is correct. That is correct. But we as a team, we made sure that we design a reliable system that is there to help the motor carrier and help the drivers, and they should function as designed.
Yeah, and one of the other things you had mentioned when we were talking about doing an interview, and one of the things that I jumped all over. Did you not mention your compliance with fuel tax as a feature of your software?
Yes, we do very good job at fuel taxes, and this system that we have developed was developed in-house. So, and this is actually experience of over 10 years, because when the EOBR was going to come in 2012. Of course, we were designing that system on a Windows CE platform, but we had to shelf that product, and because the legislation did not pass, and then we jumped on GPS tracking and fuel taxes. So those were the only two areas where we focused on at that time, back in the at that time before the ELD, and we do very good job at fuel taxes, and we make sure we have a team of IFTA auditors. You can call them. They audit every IFTA every day, and we feel proud of the work that we're doing in the fuel tax space. And our fuel tax space, the fuel tax reporting system, you can close your eyes and file the IFTA reports. And we are going to come up with, we're actually putting a plan together where we will guarantee the IFTA audits, any IFTA that is filed through our system. If there is any IFTA audit or any fine, so forth, and we will be taking care of those. And that's how proud that we feel for our IFTA fuel taxes.
Hey, and again, give me a round of applause, because IFTA is something that is critical. A lot of the insurance companies and everything look at the IFTA to see the reported miles, to see if it's all legit and everything. Gary, last word to you. How can somebody get more information about the Hutch ELD system that is Transport Canada approved? How do they get more information?
Well, they can actually, first of all, we are listed on Transport Canada site there, and they can actually contact us through our website, which is www.hutchsystems.com, or they can call our telephone number, 604-776-3564, and we would be more than happy to help them out any way possible.
And of course, I've got those links in the show notes down below. So if, as long as you're not driving, you can click on the link, or save this episode and click on the link a little bit later to reach out to Gary's team. Gary, I want to thank you so much for coming on. And once again, congrats for being, at this point, the only ELD certified provider in Canada. And it's been, 2 weeks already? And nobody else has got certified yet?
Yeah, we got listed July the 23rd. And of course, we had a little bit of word prior to that, but that was the time that we felt relieved, because during the testing, we continued to work on our ELD. We didn't let our guards down, and we still do. And now we have set goals for another milestones, and of course, we are going to achieve those.
And just the last thing I want our listeners to be aware of, I do believe that there will be much fewer number of ELD certified. And one of the reasons, and I didn't realize it until I was talking to you, Gary, there is a substantial fee that goes with getting getting certified. It's not done by the government for free. You're paying for that process. And there's also a renewal process, is there not, for the ELD systems?
Yes, that is very correct. And of course, there's some surveillance fees. And when I was talking to FP Innovation, and they told me one thing: Gary, make sure your ELD continue to comply with the Transport Canada website, and we will be surveillancing your ELDs. And if we find it is not complying, well, then we will talk to you. And it's actually a very, very strong message to the ELD provider. Like, it's not just the journey has just begun. Getting our ELD certification was just the beginning of it, and now actually the true work is actually starting now, because there will be surveillancing, and we need to be on top of the game to make sure that our ELD continues to comply with the Transport Canada mandate, and it meets all the technical standards.
Beautiful. Thanks, Gary, and congrats once again to Hutch Systems and your team for being the first certified ELD provider in Canada.
And thank you all my Hutch warriors. And as I mentioned, we call them Hutch warriors, and I'm actually going to congratulate every Hutch warrior that I was talking to Chris, and Chris had me on his channel. And thank you, Chris, very much.
Hey, you're welcome, Gary. Thanks for coming on. I hope you loved the show as much as I did. Please leave us a like, a thumbs up, a review, a comment, a rating if it is in your heart. Thank you so much. And I do really appreciate your time. And join us again next week for another exciting interview.